When Egypt seized the Suez Canal, the old colonial empires discovered their limits. I'm Matt Haskell, I'm a high school history teacher, and I'm taking you through Billy Joel's song, We Didn't Start the Fire, line by line, lyric by lyric, and we're here now with Trouble in the Suez. When Billy Joel sings Trouble in the Suez, he's pointing to the Suez Crisis of 1956, which was a showdown that humbled the old empires, but it also boosted Arab nationalism and showed how TV-age diplomacy could actually stop a war. So let's start with the spark. On July 26th of 1956, Egypt's leader, Gamal Abdel Nasser, nationalized the Suez Canal. And the Suez Canal is this waterway that's been long controlled by British and French interests. Now, Nasser was able to frame it as a sovereignty issue and also a way to fund the Aswan High Dam after Western financing had fallen through. So in London and Paris, the leaders saw a threat to their prestige, then trade, and also what their position was in the Middle East. And what happened next was planned in secret. In late October, Israel snuck across the Sinai in Operation Kadesh. Britain and France issued an ultimatum to both sides to stop fighting and then withdraw from the canal zone, knowing that Egypt would refuse. Then they bombed Egyptian airfields and launched paratroopers and amphibious landings near Port Said to separate the combatants and then regain control of the canal. But then the surprise came from Washington and Moscow. President Eisenhower refused to back the attack, and he pressed Britain with both financial and political pressure and pushed the crisis onto the United Nations. The Soviet Union, who was simultaneously trying to deal with the revolt in Hungary and Budapest, was in the process of basically crushing that. They condemned the invasion and threatened retaliation. And so under intense pressure, Britain and France agreed to a ceasefire and began to withdraw. A new UN emergency force was deployed, and this was the first large, sustained peacekeeping operation of its kind by the United Nations. Well, and the costs were real here. There was fighting and scuttled ships that blocked the canal. This did interrupt global shipping until its clearance in 1957. Britain's Prime Minister Anthony Eden resigned soon after. Nasser, who had defied two colonial powers, remained in control, emerged as a pan-Arab hero. Israel withdrew from Sinai, but gained a period of free passage through the Straits of Tiran, and a UN buffer was put in place. So arrangements that would eventually unravel a decade later in 1967. So why is this line in the song? Well, because the Suez Crisis is kind of a pivot point. It marks the moment when the old European empires learned they could not act without the United States or risk the reaction of the Soviet Union. It also showed how the UN could improvise peacekeeping and how a single strategic choke point could just, tug the entire world's economy near ruin. So as we tie it all back to the song, Trouble in the Suez condenses nationalization, secret collusion, superpower pressure, and then UN peacekeeping into basically one phrase. And this kind of puts 1956 into a snapshot. So the reason why it matters is, well, Suez explains the post-imperial world. There's power shifting from London and Paris to Washington and Moscow. You have Arab nationalism on the rise, and the UN effectively inventing a new tool, putting into place some new powers. It's also a case study in how economics, media, and alliances can really put a stop to any kind of battlefield gains, right? Try to put a war, behind them. If you've enjoyed this particular segment of We Didn't Start the Fire, this episode, please leave a like, a comment, or a follow. And we'll be moving on to a whole nother verse here when we move on to the first line and the lyric, Little Rock. Thanks for watching.